Now, just to point this out, this story didn't really happen to me, but it actually happened to a friend of mine back in 2016. Now, we'll call her by the name of Haley. Haley was about in her senior year of high school, and this was something really shocking that happened back in 2016 in January. Now, pretty much I was sick from school that day, but it was honestly really shocking. Now, Haley was at her class, I think at the second class of the day, which she had was science. As she was doing her own thing in science, making on a project and working on it, the announcement came on saying that the school would be going on lockdown. Confused as she was her science teacher instructed all the students to do as what they always should do when there was a lockdown drill. They all followed the rules and did their best to be quiet. However, they weren't sure as to what was going on, but it sounded really weird. Suddenly, they ended up hearing what seemed to sound like banging coming from the door, freaking most everybody out. Haley honestly thought that this was going to be the end of it all, when all of a sudden there was police shouting, "Put your hands up!" And as soon as that happens, and whoever was screaming and yelling to try to get the police to let them go. But that was not the case, as they didn't really hear much from it after that. When the intercom came back on, they said the students may remain in their classrooms till the end of the bell, aka the end of the class, and they may go to their lunch break. However, they weren't really sure as to what was going on, but all the students were quite shocked and ended up really confused. They had no idea who this was or anything, but they had a feeling that something must have happened when that lockdown drill went on. It wasn't until the next day when Haley returned to school, the teachers ended up telling everyone that someone who was mentally unstable came in with a knife saying that he was going to kill some people. It turns out that this man, who happened to be in their mid-60s and ended up having a mental illness, severe ones in fact, and which is why the school went on lockdown. It was also explained that he was taken back to the mental asylum, but they have no idea what happened to him after that. To this day, though, Haley still isn't sure about why this man wanted to go into the school just to hurt some students, but whatever the intentions may be, she definitely does not want to know. Now, this was taken in a high school by a school janitor who happened to used to work in my high school until when I completed my sophomore year in school. He ended up going to be transferred to a different school. Now, I can't exactly remember what different school he was in, but it was at the other side of town, and it was definitely a very shocking story that happened to him while he was working at that school. Now, his name at the time will have him leave anonymous for obvious reasons, but this school janitor happened to be in his 40s, and he enjoyed having this job. He mainly liked having to be around other people, such as other janitors, teachers, and that. He got to work with some of them. However, though, during his time as a janitor, he would usually clean up bathrooms, mop up floors, clean up messes, that type of janitor stuff. However, one day was very different. He was on the second floor, mainly mopping up the hallway, and it was during the second last period of the day, which happened to be period 4. As he was mopping up the floor, he ended up hearing what seemed like glass shattering and followed by screaming. He honestly had no idea what was going on, and he thought that maybe a student had a meltdown. As that rarely happens, a broken window is rare for that to happen, especially if a student breaks it. He ended up looking to see out in the front, which was not far from where he was standing. It happened to be be a woman. This woman was actually staring at him, and she held what seemed to be like a gun in her hands. This janitor honestly knew for a fact that she didn't notice him, but she had a gun in her hands, and she looked like she was in her mid to late 30s. She was panting and muttering stuff under her breath. My janitor, their friend, couldn't really understand what she was saying, as she was like a couple feet away from him, so he couldn't really understand what she was saying. She was saying, like, "I have to kill someone," over and over again. This honestly got really concerning, and my janitor, their friend, was going to go to the office and alert them about it, but that is when the intercom came on saying that the school would be going on lockdown. Honestly, this girl walked away from my janitor friend, and he was walking close behind, making sure that he wasn't caught by this woman, not sure if this woman was dangerous, was mentally ill, or maybe she had intentions of killing someone. She was going through all the classrooms, banging on the doors and screaming some cuss words, and some of them were racial slurs. Now, I won't say what racial slurs they were, but they were pretty messed up. Pretty offensive language came from her mouth as she said that she'll kill people for Satan, quote unquote. Honestly, that was shocking, as it seems like she was completely delusional or something, and had been screaming and even kicking lockers and even trying to kick down any doors. The janitor, however, seemed to have a pocket knife on him, and he always carried it around. However, this woman turns around and sees him and starts trying to shoot at him. He thankfully was able to dodge the shots as she was firing her guns at him. But when my janitor friend ended up turning around and see that she had no ammo left, she reached out and took out what seemed to be like a fire axe and started to charge towards him. Screaming as she was about ready to swing at him, he ended up dodging the axe, which it hit what seemed to be the door of one of the classrooms. As she was struggling to get it off and out so she can swing him again, the janitor ended up getting the knife and putting it towards her neck, telling her to drop the weapon, to which she did. She had her hands up as he ended up pulling her away while still having the knife close to her neck. Now, keep in mind that this janitor was doing his job to try to keep everybody safe. As soon as she dropped her weapon and had her hands up, he ended up letting her go and saying that he is calling the cops. She ended up running out of the school the minute the cops showed up, and they searched the entire school but couldn't find who this woman was. This was still very shocking since this was taking place in September of 2014. The school that my janitor friend was at was decently secured, but nothing like this has ever happened, but it was very surprising. What still shocks them today is who was that woman and why did she have an axe and a gun? Was she planning to murder somebody? What were those muttering words that she was saying under her breath? That is one question that will still remain a mystery to this day, and my janitor friend still works at that school today, but nothing like this has ever happened since then. And as for that woman, I hope she never returns to that school again, even with no weapons on her. Now, this happened to one of my friends, which we'll call him by the name of Charlie for the sake of the story. So, this happened to Charlie sometime in the early mid-2000s, and he was in middle school. Now, he was living somewhere in Kentucky at the time, but I haven't really talked to him since this incident he told me. Charlie was about in the 8th grade, and it was sometime before school let out for the winter break. He was in his classroom having like a holiday party with all of his other classmates, and they were watching the movie Elf when this happened. I can't exactly remember if it was 2004 or 2005, but it was around the mid-2000s, so as Charlie was doing his usual thing at school, mainly just hanging out and etc., but he was also attending to this Christmas party that his classroom was hosting. He all of a sudden heard the intercom going on saying that the school would be on lockdown. Why would there be a school lockdown before the Christmas break was everybody's guess and questions. So they were all doing as they were told, and they stayed what seemed to be what felt like hours. But in reality, it was only 20 minutes. After 20 minutes have gone by, and all of a sudden, Charlie ended up hearing what seemed like a woman laughing hysterically. It came from the intercom and really spooked the students and had no idea what was going on. It sounded like the woman was either on drugs or was high on weed. But eventually, 5 minutes later, the principal said that the lockdown is over and everyone can continue doing what they were doing. What really confuses Charlie was that who is the woman that was laughing hysterically? Of course, before the end of the day, when he was getting ready to leave to go to his bus, he ended up asking the principal and even some of the staff at the office if someone was on the intercom laughing that hysteric sound. The principal said that no one was at the intercom area to pronounce that. But then that was the very most confusing thing. Who or what made that laugh on the intercom? That still haunts Charlie's mind to this day, and it wouldn't be surprising if it was completely paranormal. Now, this happened to a janitor back in 2013, and this was taking place around the summertime before school was out for the summer. It was sometime in June when this happened, and the janitor at the time of the story, we'll call her by the name Monique. Monique was a janitor for about 20 years, and she was 53 years old when this happened. As she was cleaning up the cafeteria one day, it was around the last period of the day, before everybody was off from school for the summer break. As she was doing her usual thing, cleaning up the tables and that, she ended up hearing on the announcements that the school would be going on lockdown. She ended up being instructed to hide or stay in one area, which she did, and she did her best to not be around any windows whatsoever. She ended up staying under the table and did her best to be quiet. As Monique was just doing her own thing by keeping quiet, she ended up looking over to see that there was someone who kicked down the door. He was basically a man, maybe in about his mid-40s, and he was about maybe 6'1" tall, and he was basically screaming and cussing, saying, come out, whatever you are, and stuff like, I'm going to freaking kill you. He's been saying stuff like that. It honestly startled Monique. Not sure what this guy was actually saying or doing. She ended up staying under the table for a while. He started cussing, and he even started flipping chairs around and ended up going as far as slamming things into places. It honestly startled Monique, knowing the fact that she had no idea that this man seemed to be more aggressive. She ended up staying under there for what seemed to be like a long time. She stayed there for a while, thinking and praying to God that this man did not find her. He then turns around and then walks out of the cafeteria, slamming the door aggressively. As soon as Monique realizes that the coast was clear, she got up and ended up dialing 911. As she was on the phone with the police said that they were going to be on their way. And what followed next was honestly disturbing. Suddenly she ended up hearing what seemed to like gunshots, followed by some students screaming. It was at this moment that she ended up seeing a student who happened to be shot in the shoulder, and she was limping. Well, not really limping, but she was holding onto her shoulder when she went over to Monique. Monique did her best to patch up the bandage as best she could and told the student to apply pressure on it to stop the bleeding. It turns out that when the police arrived, they arrested the man, and it was revealed that he had killed at least 4 students and injured the rest of some teachers and even some students. They had no idea why this man came in with a gun, but he had been sent to prison for life, and nothing like this has ever happened. But Monique still wonders to this day if this man could somehow break out of prison and try to come back for them. But, however, she's never seen him since and prays and hopes to God that she never sees him again.